Hi again, it's Mrs. T for another installment of Sociology, Week 3, Lesson 4. This is a continuation of our discussion of norms. So in the last video, I mentioned that there are 3 different types of norms that range from not so important to extremely important in the eyes of society or the subculture that we belong to. And so we're going to cover those 3 norms in those 3 types of norms in this video. So I've got them written on the board here. There are 3 types of norms. Folkways is the first one, and those cover common everyday behaviors that, remember, have a component of everyday expected things that we're supposed to do. Social rules about expected and unexpected behavior. So folkways, common everyday behaviors like table manners or something that we learn early on. Think about some of the simple rules that we're supposed to follow with table manners, like I don't know, in my house, no elbows on the table, no talking with food in your mouth. Are those still things that younger generations learn from the people we interact with every single day? Or the way that we eat some things with forks and knives and spoons and other things with our fingers. French fries are just fine with our fingers, but not mashed potatoes. They're made out of the same thing, newsflash, but for some reason, we can't scoop up our mashed potatoes with our fingers and eat them that way. We have to have that fork or spoon to do that, but French fries are just fine. We can scoop up the ketchup with the French fry or mayonnaise if you're in the Netherlands, and those are perfectly fine. And there's an example of how culture is different from one place to the next. They might have French fries or pommes frites in the Netherlands, but instead of a package of ketchup to go with it, they're going to probably pump a good quantity of wonderfully delicious mayo on top of the French fries. So what goes with your French fries? Ketchup or mayo? There's a difference in a folkway from one place to the next. So folkways cover these common everyday behaviors that we learn in our daily life that the members of our subgroup or our immediate social group expect of us on a daily basis. Mores, on the other hand, that's how you pronounce this word. Mores comes from the word mos, M-O-S. Mores, this is the root word for morality. This is a more serious type of norm. They are part of everyday life, but they address more serious issues, statements of values or ethics or morality. Things like being sexually exclusive in a relationship or a marriage. Things like not cheating or telling lies. Things like being trustworthy. These are concepts that go along with mores in a society. These are parts of everyday life potentially, but when someone violates expectations, more expectations, there can be serious sanctions associated with them. So for instance, if a husband and a wife, if a husband finds out that a wife is cheating in the marriage, this is a serious violation of the expectations of that marriage relationship in daily life. Infidelity is a violation of mores expectations. It goes against value systems, maybe ethics and morality. There can be serious sanctions not only from the husband, but if there are children, the children can be very angry with the woman. The friends of the couple can take sides. People can lose friends over it and maybe even destroy the marriage. And so there are some serious sanctions that society has in place, so to speak, to try to prevent violating mores that are really more of a bitter pill, so to speak, to take than if somebody had to fuss at you for eating your mashed potatoes with your fingers, like we said just a minute ago, or wiping your mouth on your sleeve instead of a napkin. These would be something that you might get a negative sanction for, but it would be like, stop that, don't you know any better? It wouldn't necessarily be uprooting your life and upturning some of your social circle like that particular example of mores would be. Also, laws are a type of norm. Now, the difference with laws than the other two is that it's always written down. In order for it to be a law in sociology, it has to be written down. It can originally come from a not so serious place, or in the folkway realm, or it can come from a much more serious place in the moray realm. Okay, so it can range from serious to not so serious, but laws are a type of norm that is written down, and therefore the sanctions that go along with these written down norms, those are written down too. So, for instance, my syllabus that you have agreed to by staying in this class with me past the drop and add period, there's a law. You stayed with me in the class past the drop and add period, so you technically agree to all of the policies in the syllabus. I have a section in there on academic integrity, and it gives you an explanation of what academic integrity is, the expectations that the college has, that I have, and the sanction that you can expect if, God forbid, I know you aren't thinking about it, anybody commits a violation of academic integrity, such as cheating, collusion, or plagiarism. Again, I know you're not going to do it, but you can consider that section of my syllabus, or the entire syllabus itself, to be an example of a type of norm in sociology. It's a law. It's written down rules that you're supposed to follow, and if you don't follow those written down rules, the sanctions for what you should expect to happen to you are also written down. And so that's the major difference. It can be a not so serious violation of law, like jaywalking, which is crossing a highway, crossing a right-of-way of cars outside the designated marked area. So for doing that, I've been told in the past, some of my students were hanging out in the river market pre-COVID days, and they were just walking back and forth from one bar to the next in that area. And they got a warning. Somebody came up, a police officer came up and said, "Y'all cross the street in the crosswalk. This is a warning." And the officer went so far as to write out a warning ticket that explained to my student that should they get caught doing this again, they would not receive a warning the next time. Instead, it would be a $25 fine. So none of us want to pay $25. My student was very, very glad to get the warning instead, but the $25 is not so far out of the scope for the kind of law that was being violated by crossing the street outside of the designated area. On another hand, if you commit some sort of theft or assault on a person, which is much more serious than merely crossing the street outside the designated area, you should expect a much more serious sanction to occur. And depending upon the degree of the assault, and you've seen enough law enforcement shows probably on TV to hear about the first degree, the second degree, the third degree, which describes the severity of the assault or a theft. The sanction associated with that is also more severe or less severe, depending upon the type of serious crime that is committed. So these are the different types of norms. I've got them so really clearly delineated on the board here. It makes them seem like really clear cut, but they're not so clear cut. They're kind of in the eye of the beholder. As a matter of fact, we talked about eating horse meat in a previous lecture, and where would we put that as far as categorizing it into a type of norm? Is it something that's really not so serious that, eating food is a common everyday thing and so horse meat is not a big deal? Or would we put it down in the mores area? Some people do put it in the mores area where it's unethical to eat that kind of animal because we consider that kind of animal to be a pet, whereas we do not consider a pig or a cow to be a pet. So those are okay animals to eat, but not the horse, for instance. And I realize some people are vegetarians in general because they find it unethical to eat animals at all, right? So these things are not so clear cut because we're not going to just have, a rule book that never changes or that doesn't have a wide variety of responses and sanctions from one subculture of people to the next in society, vegetarian or vegan or omnivores. for instance. Also, language is very important, right? We've talked about language before, and there are folkways and maybe even also mores regarding language and word choice. True story. We haven't talked about socialization yet, but here's a true story that goes on with the socialization process. A friend of my husband and I, another married couple, they had a mechanic shop, and because they owned it, when they had a baby, they brought her with them to work. And so the baby grew up in the mechanic shop too, which sounds great to be able to not have to put your baby in daycare. But here is the tricky part, and tell me, where does this fit in, folkways or mores? One of the micro-scale subcultural things, norms in the mechanic shop was that everybody spoke regularly with cuss words. They didn't use them in a mean, angry cuss word way. They just used them in a regular conversational kind of way. For instance, if it was a beautiful day outside, they might say it's an effing beautiful day outside. And this went on while this baby was there and while she learned her language skills too. And because there were no sanctions for anyone that the baby observed when somebody said it's an effing beautiful day outside, that's what the baby learned also, because she did not notice that there were any sanctions that anyone gave to the mechanics when they were speaking to each other with this, so she did too. And then when she was potty training, the norm for language with her parents, they did not say, do you need to go pee-pee or poo-poo or use those kinds of words. They used the real words. They'd say things like, do you need to go take a piss? Or do I need to wipe your ass for you? They would say these kinds of things to the child while she was potty training, and there were no sanctions associated with those words around that 2-year-old, so that 2-year-old did not learn anything other than those words were acceptable. So where does that go? Were those parents abusive because they taught her these words that are unacceptable for her age group? Or is that just something that we laugh and it's comedic because it violates folkways? Which is where comedy comes from, by the way. Violations of norms that we take for granted. That's how you become a good comedian, is you know norms really, really well, and you can twist them just a little bit to make people feel uncomfortable or have a laugh reaction. And what are you thinking right now when I'm telling you about this little girl? Is it a laugh reaction? Or is it a shameful kind of reaction for what these parents did to this child without the proper upbringing or whatever it is you want to say? Well, there's not necessarily a line. Like, I'm not smart enough to tell you where the line is between whether it's just a folkway or whether it's something much more serious in society. Laws cover both the unserious and the very serious things in society. But you decide. What are some norms that you have violated in the past because you think they are ridiculous, and what are the sanctions that you've gotten? We have a whole chapter on that. Chapter 6, when we get to deviant behavior, we will revisit the acceptable versus unacceptable side of norms. But in the meantime, these are the 3 types of norms that you need to know for Chapter 2's topics, and I will see you again on YouTube next time. Bye.